Hey everyone, welcome to Community Roots, a place where we gather in community to talk about mental health so we can travel the journey of life together. I'm Samuel Richards.
I'm Julie Richards.
I'm Sarah Wakefield.
And welcome today. You know, it's been a while since we've had an off the beaten path, but I'm so excited to introduce our next guest, Karen Young. So welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we've talked about Karen a couple times on the show. Our big thing that we've done before is Hey Warrior, where we've talked about the amygdala and kind of, you know, how to process the fight or flight response that you get, that sort of, you know, warrior in your head, how you can put it into different terms so that you can use that as, you know, a benefit rather than a deterrent or something to get angry at. So, yeah, I'm so excited to have you on the show and to pick your brain a little bit about some of these things.
No, I'm thrilled to be here. It's I'm excited to be a part of the conversation.
So where did it all start for you, Karen? What's your heart or passion for these children's books? Maybe fill us in a little bit on your story, who you are, what are the things that are important to you?
Yeah, so I started as a psychologist and I was working in private practice a lot. With a lot of families, adults who are at the other end of it. And what I came to realize quite quickly was how important the information was to be out there. So the things that we were doing and the things that we knew as psychologists, it was actually information that everybody needed. Because what I know with kids is when they're struggling, it's not in front of me. It's in front of I would have them for 45 minutes in a session, but it would be with their parents or their teachers or their grandparents or the other important adults in their lives. And for sure, therapy and psychology can be really important, but it's not the full picture, because what we need to do is really support the important adults in the life of a child. And so that's one of the reasons I started Hey Sigmund. It actually started for adults as well, because we also need to be able to tap into that information, and not everybody has access to the resources and information we have. Then it moved into kids when I came to realize just how important it is for parents and the important adults in the life of a child to have this information.
So Hey Sigmund is the overarching. Where did you start the beginnings of all of this?
Yeah.
Even how did you get the name?
Yeah, honestly, that was harder than naming my children. It started because it just started as a psychology resource. So it was never intended to replace therapy or anything like that, just bringing information, making it mainstream. When I started my training, we didn't have the internet, so we didn't have this. The only way to get information was through books. Some books would be okay, some books wouldn't, or actually to go to a therapist. So we're really lucky to be in these times where we can do this and share the information. And Hey Sigmund came from, I thought, okay, who do people think of when they think of psychology? And it's Sigmund Freud. And some of his ideas were just really wacky, but some of them made sense. And so it was, some of them led into, and it's like we say, there are no silly ideas because they all lead into bigger thinking or more important thinking or valuable thinking. So Hey Sigmund was like, hey Sigmund, we've come a while since then. We've come away since then. We know a few more things now. And it was just to rewrite some of the things, add to some of the things, and we do it differently now. So that's where that came from. Also just because I thought Sigmund was a cool name. And I wanted it to have that vibe of just that accessibility and that conversational tone about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how I had looked at your website before we started this call, and I like that the line, research-driven information on the art of being human and being with humans. I kind of like that because what we talk about in the day-to-day with this podcast, you know, is this is just living life and how to kind of work with other people and kind of, you know, getting into sync with yourself. But I was curious kind of with that language of being able to take your research and put it into terms that, you know, kids can read it. Tell me about that process.
Yeah, so for me, I think if kids can understand it, everybody can understand it. And so for me, a big part of what I wanted to do was to actually make the information accessible, but also to start up conversations. Let's start up conversations about anxiety and what it's like to feel lonely or isolated, or those conversations about peer pressure or not fitting in. Let's start those conversations about how we all get mad and sad,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes nothing makes sense. Let's have those conversations, but let's make a way for kids to have those conversations too. Because what I know for certain is kids are feeling all this stuff. They're feeling it all. But if they don't have word to put to these feelings, that makes things bigger for them, because we all need to put stories to our experience. We all need to make sense of it. So it was doing that, but also all the stuff we do, if everything we do, if we could understand the whole story around it, it would all make sense. So what I'm trying to do is bring more information so kids, parents can make sense of their behavior. When they start understanding it, then they can start to manage it or understand why it might be with kids. We need to make sure our expectations are developmentally appropriate, that parents understand that when kids do stuff, when they go into big feelings, it's really hard for them to move towards hard or new things, that's actually not a reflection on their parenting. And it's not a reflection on the child. It's actually developmental. They're just not ready yet. And the things that they do, if we look at separation anxiety, it's got an important job to do. Anxiety's got an important job to do. Anger, all this stuff has important jobs to do. But if we don't understand it, it can look like bad behavior. It can look like bad parenting. It's not. It's not that. There's something else more important going on. So it was to bring light to that as well.
Mm-hmm. And really, what a great equalizer to understand that we're all humans. We all have brains. We all have amygdalas. We all have nervous systems. And so the things that are happening in our children are also happening in our bodies and brains too. So it's growing in the self-awareness piece, as well as what are these sometimes baffling behaviors or challenges that we're experiencing is really common to all people.
That's right. And I think one of the things with my books that I wanted to do was, they are for kids, but also to help all adults understand what's going on. But in a 5-minute, in a 5-minute way to understand that. So here's a 5-minute way to understand what's going on with anxiety. Here's a 5-minute way to understand how strong our brains are and the way they look after us. Here's a 5-minute way to understand big feelings. Like it's that. So it's kind of condensing, and it's putting light to things in a way that's simple, but actually opens up conversation. So kids don't feel, I don't know, I suppose lectured or preached to, and in a way that's fun and engaging and playful. And that in itself, it builds connections, it builds relationships, it does all of that.
As an adult, reading through this, seeing your books and seeing, going through your website, the feeling of validation is very strong, as it should be. But as a child, I can just imagine, finally getting affirmation that your feelings are big feelings, that you're okay to express and you're okay to have all the feelings that you're feeling, and it's teaching you something. And what a generous gift you've given everyone, Karen, especially children, to say you're right. Yes, you're being hijacked right now, or your amygdala is trying to teach you something right now, and there's nothing wrong with you.
Oh, thank you. And I think, what I get from kids a lot, especially when kids go into big angry, is things like, I'm a monster. Don't come near me. I'm so awful. I get so angry. And I go, no, this actually happens in everyone. You might do it a bit differently to the people you see, but it happens in everyone. Everyone gets scared. Everyone does this. Everyone, will be in front of something really important that they need to do and then feel like they need to backtrack. That's actually really normal. And that's your brain and body looking after you. So thank you for that. That's what I'm, that's what I want. And I know how it feels to sometimes feel different, or not enough. And we don't want kids feeling like that, or parents feeling like that. So it's it's just shining it. There's something I used to get from adolescence a lot. There was two things I used to get from adolescence. The first was I thought it was just me. So when I'd start talking about anxiety, or wherever we talk about anxiety, we can talk about anger because it's kind of the same process in the brain. And so I thought it was just me. I go, no, it's everybody. You're not broken. And the other thing I would get is I didn't know who to talk to about it because it can feel quite isolating. But if only they know that the experiences that make them feel quite isolated are actually the things that unite us all, that we have in common. So that's the other thing I think that is really important, which is why we need to have this conversation, which is why I love that you're having these conversations, because we all feel it.
I think it's something, that we've talked about with some guests and kind of expressed between the hosts here too, is I know in the United States, it's a big need that we don't fill throughout the education system at all. And it's kind of just something that you pick up little snippets of as you go through life, unless you're actively, chasing good mental health. So I think even being able to look at, those moments of affirmation, like Sarah was saying, even adults don't get that. And those questions with those adolescents that you were talking about, like, am I actually okay? Is this normal? Is something, I feel like we all feel multiple times throughout our lives.
Oh, absolutely we do. And even hearing that, even hearing someone else say, yeah, I feel like this, is so soothing and so calming. And we stop feeling as lonely and as isolated in it, which I think is one of the big drivers of mental unwellness, is that it's that sense of isolation and deficiency. It kind of, we can deal with the symptoms, but it's the response to the symptoms from ourselves or others that can actually be a bigger problem. And if you look at adolescents, they're going through so much anyway, and they're amazing what they're dealing with, especially in the world they're inheriting now. Add to that all the brain changes that they go through, the way they're going to feel bigger, they're going to feel more, they're going to be conscious of themselves. We need to make sense of it and help them understand it. And at least then we might not change, we can't change the fact that they'll feel big. And same with children, we don't want to change that. Lots of really good things have happened because adolescents felt big. We don't want to change that, but what we want to do is make sure that that doesn't drive shame, or it doesn't drive a sense of breakage or loneliness. And that's why we need these conversations.
How do you see conversations coming out of your books that you write? Like just the reading together. I love that you had mentioned about these books are great for adults. I absolutely love the books because you can sit, the illustrations are very kind of captivating. They're just adorable, cute. I just like spending time with your books, honestly. And then I got one of the little plushies of the Hey Warrior. And so it's like just being able to sit with the books alone is like regulating to my nervous system, and being able to talk about them to others. It's so great as an adult because we don't always have time to read a ton of really thick books, or we don't have time or bandwidth. And so something like you said that could be, you mentioned 5 minutes. I could probably spend an hour just looking at all the pictures, and I just feel a little better just looking at them. I feel kind of, I don't know, my inner child seems to dance a little when I see it all. I get kind of giddy. But how do you see someone taking it from the book to, how do we learn to ask the questions, or how do we explore? Or I think conversations can be challenging, especially in a world that's very focused on their phone or on distraction or on work. It's hard to even teach people how to engage with one another.
Absolutely. So there's a few different ways. I know they're being used in schools and classrooms, and that's good because we have a whole thing. But if it's just one-to-one, it's things like, so the conversation starter might be, it makes sense that you feel like this. It makes sense that you get angry. It makes sense that you get scared. It happens to all of us. And do you want me to help you understand what's going on? Because it really helped me when I understood. With my own children, one of my children, so she was really anxious, and I said, oh, do you feel like this? Do you feel like this? Do you feel like this? So it was a hey warrior conversation. She said, yeah, I feel like all of those things. I'm like, oh, well, let me tell you what that is. That comes from, and that was that conversation. The books, so if parents can understand what's in the books, that's the way to start a conversation. With older kids, one of the things I say is, it can be really confusing when you don't know why you're feeling what you're feeling. But what I want you to know is what you're feeling is so normal, and it absolutely makes sense, and it's actually happening for a really good reason. Have a look at this book. I know the pictures, they might be a bit cutesy for you. I just flag that so they don't go, you're giving me a baby book. So they might, they might be a bit cutesy for you, but the information is really important, and it'll just help you. It'll help make sense of it for you. It helped me make sense of it, because that's the truth. When I understood what was happening, I go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then you can just, you can decide what to do with it from there. So it's really just picking up, meeting them where they are in their experience. When everybody's calm and settled, if they've got something coming up, saying, I get you might be a bit nervous. You seem a bit nervous about it. Here, let me talk. Let me show you something. It's those conversations. Then once they have that basis of understanding, kids talk about their amygdala, and they'll say things like, oh, my amygdala is just getting a bit upset, or mum, your amygdala is getting a bit excited. I've heard of kids saying that. Someone will come home and mum or dad are going, and they'll say, don't worry, it's just their amygdala. It's just their amygdala. It's okay. So we have a common language, and we have to change the language. But it can start gently with a storybook. And the illustrations are beautiful. And that was all the illustrator. She had text on a page, and that's what she did with it. And she's really she's brought the book to life, I feel like. Because even that is curious. It brings curiosity to it all. Do you want to hear what this book is about? Or do you want to hear what this is about? And we start talking. And then there's an anchor point to keep going back to with the books. The new book, Feeling Brain, Thinking Brain, we talk about that a lot. So amygdala is coming into common language for children. Then we want to bring in feeling brain, thinking brain. This is what's happening. What's your feeling brain doing? What do you need to do to bring your thinking brain back? So it's just about slowly changing the language to not even tolerate the stuff that happens, but actually embrace it and go, this is actually the way I'm looked after. And isn't my brain magnificent? And isn't my body magnificent? The way it does this, the way it looks after me like this. And that's the opposite to shame. It's impossible to feel shame, or it's impossible to feel anxiety about the anxiety when we come from that space. So we're going to try and, to break it there. Break that. It's a circuit. It can be a, anxiety feeds anxiety, which feeds anxiety, which feeds it's that, and anger feeds anger, and we can be the circuit breaker by bringing in a really playful conversation to it all. And when you start talking to kids, want to hear about their brains. It's science. Let me teach you some science. Let me teach you about your brain. We teach them about their bodies. We're really certain about that. We teach them what is good to eat, why they need to exercise. We teach them about body safety and how their bodies work. We've got to teach them about their brains as well. And they want to hear it. They want to hear it. And really, in a really not patronizing way, they're up to this. They're up to getting the information, and they're up to hearing it and doing something with it. And I think we need to lean into that.
This makes me want to go buy Hey Warrior and give it to all my teacher friends, no matter what grade they're teaching, and just say, hey, could you read a little bit of this to your group, like your class every day? This is so important for us. And that validation, you spoke to it again about, hey, your brain is beautiful, your body is wonderful, like look what it's doing, it's science. I just keep coming back to this validation of the human being, the art of being human, and how it's glorious. It's absolutely glorious. It's giving everyone so much credit and allowing us to be ourselves, and especially for children, because children are so influenced by their surroundings, by their immediate, you know, their nature, their nurtured, all of that. I'm just so excited about this, and I hope all of our listeners um, are
Thank
as
you.
eager as I am.
Well, I think it's what I always say, big feelings don't hurt children. It's feeling alone in those big feelings that hurt children, and feeling deficient or broken because of those big feelings or those big responses that we all have. You know, the feeling like we need to resist, feeling like we judge ourselves because we feel lonely or because we feel different, judging ourselves because we feel angry, parents who judge themselves because their children are going into big feelings or big behavior, and that causes more problems. So the response to the behaviors and how we feel, I think, causes more problems than the actual feelings. We have to really respect them, and they're there for a reason, and they contain a lot of wisdom. But if we don't understand what that is, we'll misinterpret that. We all will, and we all do anyway, even with the information. But we're, you know, we're making a start. We're making a start, and I love that this is being talked about in classrooms. One of the things I get a lot too is, but do we use the word anxiety or do we use the word anxious? And I say, yeah, we do. We do. We have to. We actually have to. We use the word angry and sad and jealous and excited and happy. We use all the feeling words. Anxiety isn't a diagnosis. Generalized anxiety disorder is a diagnosis. Anxiety isn't a diagnosis. Anxiety is a very normal human experience that is there for a very good reason, and for sure sometimes it gets in the way, but the more we can understand about it, and respect the job that it's trying to do and actually take charge of it, which makes it easier if we can, you know, if we can see it as an ally, the better off we'll be. We stop fighting ourselves. We've got to stop fighting ourselves and see things for what they are.
So we talk about some different, you know, therapists on the show, different psychologists. Somebody we talk about often is Pia Melody, who's like influential to what we do. So I was curious of some of like your influential, you know, psychologists or therapists that you like to tune into or read up on to kind of help motivate how you see things.
Yeah, so the big one, anyone in neuroscience is big for me. I love Dr. Bruce Perry's work, Dr. Stephen Porges, his work around polyvagal. He just makes sense. He makes sense of why we do what we do, and why we feel. And that's what we need here. So he's kind of, he's shone the light on it and gone and just made sense of it. So rather than it being a deficiency, we're actually doing what brains and bodies are meant to do. So anything around polyvagal, which is his work, I go for. Anything from Bruce Perry, I'll go for. I kind of read more in Mona Delahooke's doing great work. I sort of read more in areas. So if there's an, you know, attachment, Gordon Neufeld, anything he puts out, I'll inhale. So they're probably the big ones that I do, that I, you know, I wouldn't even question. I would just, as soon as they do any work, I've got it in my hands and I'm just like, okay, don't anybody come near me, because I'm having my life here. They're probably the big ones, but you know, and there are lots. They're the ones that come to mind. There are lots who I dive into when I'm curious about an area. At the moment it's brain body, so it's anyone who's working with that trauma, the trauma work. I mean, that's Bruce Perry's area, because if we understand you know, what's happening there, then we can understand what's happening even for non-trauma. It's our bodies and brains do the same thing. Our brains are here to keep us safe, not happy. So we see the extreme end of what happens during trauma and those responses, and then that helps. You know, we can feed that into for all of us. We've got something to learn from that.
Well, that's exciting. We've talked about a couple of those on this show, so that's awesome. Those kind of brought memories. I know Mom can talk way more about it. I'd have to probably revisit some of our notes.
Yeah. There are a lot of people doing really good work at the moment. One of the things I love that I'm seeing is the walls between the disciplines are falling. And I think it has to. It has to. So, you know, the psychology world, which traditionally has been about mind, we're now realizing we can't do that without looking at body, because it's all of it. And so we do, you know, we're looking at mind body. I know when I'm doing my talks, I'll have speech therapists and OTs in the room. And you know, I know that their world is offering so much too. We need this pool of we need to support our teachers, because and I know you know, I say to teachers, I know you didn't sign up to be psychologists or counselors, and yet relationship is the most important part of your job. And here, you know, here we are. So we have to increasingly pour into this this common pool of knowledge and wisdom, and it has to come from everywhere. It has to come from everywhere, and we all need access to it. And we all come at the same stuff a different way, but it's at the end of the day, a lot of this is we're looking at the same issues. We're looking at the same. So teachers might be looking at learning, but you can't look at learning without looking at what's happening in the brain, and does that brain feel safe, and does that body feel safe? And it's the same for so many areas of this.
Well, so I might take a pause. I was going to kind of start to wrap it up and talk about your new book. Do we want to talk about anything else before then? Any last questions?
I was kind of curious about with even the state of the world right now, with current events being so overwhelming and so stressful. I wondered if there is something, even from Hey Awesome, that I look at as each page is a different mindfulness or meditation exercise that someone can pull from to help them kind of regulate that anxiety, that fear and intensity that's inside. I didn't know if you had any practices that you might share with our listeners of something that they could even use as they're hearing it now, right from the author's mouth, to say, like, what are some of those things? Because our world is often in crisis. I mean, between a global pandemic or currently at war, Ukraine and Russia, and just there's so many things that are really hard. Like this world is hard. And you've touched on, through Stephen Porges, through Bruce Perry, through Mona Delahook, all of the importance of relationship, that if we have someone that can go through it with us and we don't have to go alone, that makes it more safe or more possible, so we don't have to be quite as overwhelmed. But do you have any practices that you really love to turn to, maybe that might come from that Hey Awesome book, or otherwise, that you can help support our listeners with today?
Yeah. So probably the biggest one, if I take it back to what I do, is our brains need to feel safe. If our brains don't feel safe, it's going to send a ripple through everything. We're not going to be as available for the people around us. We're actually not going to be able to reach the safety or access the safety of the people around us. It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to sleep. It's going to be harder. Everything's going to unsettle from that. So then what I go back to is, okay, what does my brain need to feel safe right now? One of the things we do is we access our common humanity. So connection is the biggest thing, relationship. For mindfulness, what mindfulness does is mindfulness actually calms the amygdala. So that can be a really helpful thing to do if it's done consistently. It has to be done consistently. The big one for me is movement. So making sure our brains move and remembering to breathe. Breath is literally the way we support it. It supports life, and so making sure we're breathing, making sure that our bodies are strong, and our bodies are calm, and then we can't ever get away from accessing relationship wherever we need to, wherever we just don't get away from that. That's the way we feel, safest. For me, when I start to feel like things are getting big, and things are getting big, I put music in my ears and I go for a walk. We're getting rhythm, movement. That will calm the amygdala, because I would actually go back to Hey Warrior. And the reason we feel unsettled is because all of the stuff that's happening, our amygdala is hearing it, and the amygdala can't really tell, or some amygdala, it'll feel like it's happening now, and it'll feel like it's happening here. But as well as that, everything that we feel in response to that, the grief we feel in response to that, and the fear, the deep compassion we feel in response to what's happening, that's real. And again, that's important. That drives us to support each other. So anxiety that comes from that, or anger, or anything that comes from that, the sense of helplessness, that's all energy with nowhere to go. So we know the brain gears us up for fight or flight. But if there's no opportunity for fight or flight, that energy just stays in us. So then what we've got to do is look for somewhere else for that energy to go. And that's where we look at what we can do. There's not always things we can do on a global scale. We might donate to a charity, but we don't. What we can do, if there's a limit to what we can do there, is come back to what we do know, and come back to the world around us. We all contribute to the greater good of the world and a greater humanity by the way we hold ourselves and what we do, and the way we respond to the people around us. So then I go back to being more deliberate in noticing what's happening around me that I can actually contribute to. And it might just be noticing. You seem to be doing it tough at the moment, or reaching out. Do you want to meet up for a coffee? What's going on for you at the moment? And just letting it ripple that way, because this stuff is big. That's the truth of it. We are going to have amygdala that are trying to gear us up to respond, because that's what they do. And there's not going to be anywhere for that response to go to. So movement, exercise gets rid of it. Rhythm, brains love rhythm. We come back to those things. And then we bring ourselves back to our center through mindfulness, some mindfulness practices there. And sometimes it's just paying attention to breathing, and then being more deliberate in how we live our lives, and the type of world we're creating, even if it's just in the small area of space around us. It all matters.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said too about it takes that repetition and keep doing it. Like it's not a one time, okay, now I feel fine because I did that. It's more of a rewiring of our brain and nervous system happens through the repetition. So having rituals, having things that can kind of long-term gain from having lifestyle changes, of almost like making an investment every day in those practices, in those rituals that can help strengthen our brain and our nervous system to really work most efficiently.
And it is, and I think the world's been through a few years where we have been told that things aren't safe, and then we come out of it and we're seeing that things aren't safe. our immediate environment might be safe, but the world is unsettled and people are hurting. And that's going to tap into us. It's meant to tap into us. And it's what we do with that then. But it does have to be a practice of it. And we also have to recognize that how we feel in response to that is how we're meant to feel. It's not breakage, it's not deficiency, it's actually how we're meant to feel distressed at the distress of other humans. That's what drives us to respond. That's what drives us to check. And if we can't respond directly to those humans, then what we do is check ourselves and go, okay, so what can I do? I can't do all of this stuff, but what can I do? And we let anxiety do its job that way, because it is doing a job.
It's funny, nobody can see us, but we're all nodding our heads in agreement, going, yes, this is powerful. Yes, this is very meaningful.
I've received my emails that my post is on the way from Australia. I've ordered my brain book. I cannot wait. I'm just like on the edge of my seat. Do you want to tell us anything about your latest release?
Yeah, this is the book I've been wanting to write really since Hey Warrior. When I realized how much kids were just holding this information and actually doing really good stuff with it, I wanted to go more with the brain. So it's all about, and the thing about the brain book is it doesn't have to be read cover to cover. So we can pull bits out of it and talk to kids about it. It's about how, why that repetition is important, how new pathways are built in the brain, how we can build new behaviors, why it's really hard to change old behaviors and why that takes time. And the fact that it takes time isn't because we aren't capable, it's because we've got a pathway there. We've got to reroute that pathway. And how to do that talks about feeling brains and thinking brains. So if kids go into big feelings, this is going to make sense of that. Of course, it's got anxiety in it. It's got, I've also got a section in there about, so it's the start of a conversation about addiction. And in the book, I did it really safely so that we can start talking about it with little kids, about lollies or gaming or screen time, how that can happen and how quickly our brains want more and more of it. But for older kids, this can be the foundation for conversations that we need to have with them about how they can be vulnerable to addiction to substances or other things like gaming and the things they do. So it's a really safe, playful conversation about that. But parents can then, or any important adult can then take it further. So it's kind of got the skeleton there and the scaffolding, and that's the idea of it. It's a kid's book, but for everybody, to just give the and then you can take it in whatever direction you want to go. If you don't want to do anything with it, that's okay. There's enough information there for kids to do things. There's a section in the back about kindness and how that creates pathways in the brain, and how when we're kind, we get a dopamine hit. So, and that's because that's how we're meant to be. So when you do good, you feel good. There's a reason for that. So it's trying to bring intent to that and make that more deliberate. And it talks about the things that are good for the brain: rhythm, exercise, breathing. Why breathing helps settle our brain, mindfulness, all of those things. Sleep, why sleep is important. And how we can get better at anything really, just by practicing, but for better or worse. So the more we do things that aren't good for us, the more they're going to, be calling us over, and it's going to feel easier and more automatic, not because it's necessarily good for us, but just because that's the pathway that's there. But we can always change a pathway little bit by little bit by little bit. So it talks about how to do that. So basically, it can, it's two things. It's an entire conversation in itself that we can pull out. It doesn't have to be read cover to cover. It can be, but otherwise we can talk about the feeling brain today, or we can talk about habits tomorrow. But it's also the scaffolding for a bigger conversation. what do you do that you'd like to do less of? What do you do that you'd like to do more of? What have you got strong pathways around? Thoughts create pathways. So for kids who are in negative thinking, which is anxious thinking, which can lead to depression, it talks about how they become habits, not because they're real, they feel real when there's a strong thought pathway. But how can we, what can we do differently? What can we do differently here? So again, it brings intent and awareness to this stuff we do in a playful way. So one of the reasons it took ages is because we're talking neuroscience, and I love neuroscience, but it can be dry. Like I could read it, it's or not so what's happening in our brain, but for kids it has to be fun, it has to be engaging. So one of the reasons it took so long was bringing in all those things to make it more fun, I think, and playful and not heavy. We don't want it to be heavy, otherwise they will turn away from it. We don't want them to turn away from these conversations, we want them to come to. But for sure, it can also lead into deeper conversations, and you can really dive in deep water with them if that's where you want to go, in a really safe way. Again,
in my shopping cart right now.
Yeah, my email came that it's en route. So however long it takes for it to arrive from Australia, I will be getting it, and guarantee we'll have family time at my house. So it'll be like, yeah.
I hope it starts some really fun and meaningful conversations.
And just for everyone, this is at Hey Sigmund, HEYSIGMUND.com. I just want to put that plug out there. Samuel, I'm sure you were going to get.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes as well. But that's exciting. Well, so Karen, we tend to end most episodes with a gratitude or an affirmation. You're welcome to start if you want, or if that's a little bit much, then we can go around the other way. That's totally okay.
So what I'm grateful for? Okay, what I'm really grateful for is that we live in a world where even when we're separated by time zones, countries, oceans, we can actually still come together. So technology pulls us apart, but sometimes it actually brings us together. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this community in this way, and living in a world where we can actually do this. I'm grateful for that.
I wanted to say it's appreciative. I've experienced this in other fields, mostly with activism, but even as we get into mental health, just how many allies there are in the field. How, I see Hey Sigmund as you trying to get out to the world and trying to, repair things or put out, what you've learned in a way that's digestible. And I think that's a little bit of what we do at Community Roots here. And so it's just nice to know, that there's somebody across the world also pushing those good messages, pushing that good perspective that, can create some healing where we're going. So that's my gratitude.
Yeah, I just think of, I don't even know where I first heard about your work, Karen, but every book and illustration and words and insights. I still remember Samuel years ago was in a college course about something with psychology, and he remembered the term amygdala because I had read Hey Warrior with him. So it was like, and he was not a small child when I read it. So it was like, of course we're gonna have story time. Like I recently got the Boundaries book on We're Not Lions. Is that what it's?
Oh yeah,
Like yeah.
But
So it's like, okay, story time. I'm talking to adults, but it's like I get so excited to see it. So I just feel a lot of joy and appreciation for just the beautiful work and how it is accessible, and it's in bite-sized pieces that everyone can have the bandwidth for to be able to take the time or energy and really feel kind of delighted by. I love the fun and the joy in what you are drawing kids to, but you're also drawing adults to. So super appreciative for all of that.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just grateful for all this attention that we are giving to children and to their growth, and I think it's because I don't have children of my own, but my friends do, and I'm watching them and I'm thinking about my own childhood, and I am just so encouraged to give children the credit they deserve for like we were all children, so we all need to give ourselves credit. But we went through so much, and we go through so much today. But I really don't know what I'm trying to say, except like, let's go, kids! Like, this is awesome. Let's do this for the kids
Yeah.
and for
Yeah.
our inner kids.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. And our inner kids are always there.
Yeah.
They never go away. So yeah, whatever we do for those kids, ultimately it comes back for us. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call it nurturing your inner child or nurturing your inner plant, depending on the episode. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Karen, for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for joining us as well. We will have another episode up in the next 2 weeks, and we'll talk to you then.